they espouse, the excuses they offer, and indeed the promises they make in their attempts to gain our votes. But, like all elections, this one isn't just about talk, it's also about appearances, how the party leaders come across on television, whether they look the part, whether they sound passionate, and whether we believe them. So our next guest has made a special study of Irish politicians and their body language in recent weeks. Here to tell us how the leaders of the four main parties in this country have been faring is Oxford behavioural psychologist Dr Peter Collett, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, Peter. You're very welcome. Now, just because you're an Englishman doesn't make you somebody who shouldn't have an interest in the politics of the body, as it were. So this is a special subject, as it were, for you.
Yes, I have devoted quite a big chunk of my life to studying politicians.
So what is so interesting about the language, the body language of politicians?
Well, I mean, politicians are out there. They're fair game. There's a lot of material about them. They're vain. They're deceptive. And it's just so much fun reading them.
Yes, so we've had a couple of debates so far, another one on the way next week. But what we've noticed, I think, as an observation, is that they're competitive, a bit shouty on occasion. Let's take a flavour of it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Here, there.
Yeah.
What planet are you living in?
We are constantly housing people.
Okay,
I want to get Jerry Adams in.
I
want to get Jerry into. Okay.
We're wrong to degrade
All right.
staff.
I think we should
Guys, hang on a second.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
Okay, Jerry Adams.
Yeah, I'd rather my job than theirs now, in fairness. What are you thinking about looking at that? And in terms of, say, aggression, if you like?
Yeah, it's a bit of a jungle, really, isn't it? I mean, it strikes me as a kind of case of tag wrestling, but all four are in the ring at the same time.
Okay.
It's really all about aggression, conflict, defence, counterattack, and it makes it all the more reason to make it interesting for us.
So let's look at, for starters, we'll start with Jerry Adams, for example, and his behaviour. We have a clip here that might we'll look at, and maybe you'll tell us what you think, reflect on this. Before we do that, go on.
No, I was going to say about Jerry and about all of them. One of the ways in which we can look at them is in terms of their hand movements.
Yes.
Because they give themselves away unintentionally. Unconsciously, they're producing all kinds of signals that tell us some really interesting things about what's going on inside them.
So what should we be looking at? So
in his particular case, he's got like all of them, he's got a particular range of hand gestures, some of which are iconic, some of which are symbolic, but they all tell us something interesting. In his case, what I find is there's a kind of, one of his signature hand gestures is the finger point. Now this is interesting because what is this? It's the finger, the digit, being used as a surrogate weapon. He's really prodding, poking away at people, almost as though he were armed.
All right, okay, Japers. Okay, well, let's have a look and see how that works.
It's about credibility.
Excuse me.
You challenge my credibility. I'm fully entitled to tell you.
Because you made promises which you broke. There are children on trolleys, there are elderly people on trolleys. It's a centenary year of 19 and 16, and we can't even look after our poor. Tell me.
So there they are. A lot of pointing of the finger there, jabbing in the face. Micheál Martin there having a go as well. What are we talking about in terms of his hands?
He's also got a range of gestures, but what fascinates me is one in particular, and that is the hand chop. So it's repeated over and over again.
And what does the chop signify?
Well, it's there again. It's sending us a very clear message. It's saying not only to himself, but to everybody else, I'm the kind of guy who can really cut through the BS.
Okay, so here's Micheál the Chopper Martin.
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
Has said that 2016 will be the worst year in a decade for the health service, and that you underprovided by 150 million. That's what the individual said. You doctor,
not true.
And also.
Okay, so he's chopping away like a butcher there and having a go. Let's talk about Enda Kenny now. Does he have a particular...
Now, Enda, he also likes to point, by the way.
Another weapon man?
Yeah, absolutely. But there's another gesture that he uses, and it's very much his, and that is what we call the precision grip.
Yes.
That's when you bring the thumb and the forefinger together, and it's really a rather delicate way of saying to people, do you know what? I'm a bit of a brain surgeon. Present me with a tiny little delicate problem and I can get really to the nub of it.
So, and the grip.
Yeah.
Kenny.
You would drive thousands of jobs out of the country every week. And the point is that quite a lot of houses were sold back in the 80s.
The precision thing we're talking about.
It is.
Okay, the Taoiseach, Joan Burton.
No, I mean...
What?
Well, there's not a lot to say about her. I mean... No, I don't mean it in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking gesturally.
Okay.
You know, here we can identify particular, what are called, baton signals. In her case, it's very ill-formed. What she does do, however, is she repeatedly, metronomically beats out the time, emphasizing what she's saying. But if you look at the shape of her hand, it's not saying anything terribly interesting. But it's not saying anything that's either threatening or inclusive. It's, in a sense, without a message.
Well, she won't love you for that. But let's have a look and see the metronomic Joan Burton.
With good conditions, affordable childcare, smaller class sizes in our schools, and a health service that's fixed.
Yeah. Okay, talk to me about Knuckles.
Yeah. Now, you know, one of the things that we're going to see in a moment is all the politicians doing what I call the knuckle display. Now, superficially, this appears to be a gesture where the person in question is actually protecting themselves.
Yes.
But in fact, it's the exact opposite. Because what it does is it exposes the knuckles, the hard, aggressive aspects of the hands, as opposed to the soft, embracing part. And it is therefore a disguised threat signal. And it's saying to people, unknowingly, once again, you know what? I'm the kind of guy who's got knuckles, or I'm the kind of person who's got knuckles. You better watch out. You may get a load of this knuckle sandwich.
So you take it, if you go across the pond and see, say, Donald Trump, for example, he's the very opposite, isn't he?
No, Trump is doing this. Trump has been trained not to do this and to embrace the American public as a whole.
It's working for him, so maybe they should take it.
But only the American public, not the guys on the other side of the wall that he's going to build.
Well, that's another issue altogether. So meanwhile, back to the bare knuckle debates that we're talking about. Let's get a flavour of Knucklegate.
Have been renovated and given to families who would have been home estate. We filled Supreme Court, High Court, Criminal Circuit Court, District Court, set up a Court of Appeal.
3 years ago.
Okay, stop to a lot of that.
We're going to leave that.
In over 900 million in 2015 into the HSE.
The issue is to roll out capital projects which will both get the construction industry back to work, will get all of that work.
There they are, the knuckles. All right. One thing that's very striking about the debates that we're seeing is there's no crack. They're in the sense that they're very, very serious. I mean, it's a serious issue, etc., etc. But you'd think maybe crack a smile every now and again. But that seriousness is something that it's
interesting.
spotted.
I mean, it's quite characteristic. It is extremely sombre. There's no laughs at all. Well, almost no laughs.
Yes, we'll get to that in a minute.
I'll qualify that in a moment. But by and large, it's a case of all four politicians keeping up a poker face, not giving away too much. Now, the interesting clue to this is the fact that smiling is, in essence, an appeasement gesture.
Is that a smile?
Well, it's premature.
That?
It's premature. That's a bit of a smirk. We shouldn't be seeing this yet.
Okay, well, hold that thought for a second, lads, and let's talk about before. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say about the smile. It's an appeasement gesture. So I smile at you in order to indicate to you that I am not a threat.
Yes.
Now, all four of them, for them, that is the exact opposite to the signal they want to send. They want everybody to think that they are potentially a threat. And the last thing they wanted to say is, I'm the kind of guy who's trying to appease, you. So, and we know this because it tends to be the case that macho individuals reduce their smiling. People who are feeling subservient tend to increase it. So that's why there's no smiling taking place.
It's tough guy.
Exactly.
Tough guy stuff.
But
there are cases sometimes.
There are cases where they smile.
And
under two conditions. One, look at my hand.
Precisely.
Yeah. Under two conditions. One, where they manage to get the better of somebody, belittle them, score a little point. Or secondly, where somebody has actually attacked them and they want to show that they're man enough or person enough to take it.
So let's get a flavour.
I just want to add one other tiny little thing.
Go ahead.
When they do these smiles, they are invariably fake.
Ah. Well, let's see whether we can decide which is which. Have a look at this then. Is that fake or real? Jerry?
Now that is a fake smile.
How about this one? Hey, that's funny. And here's John Burton.
Yeah.
So you're getting a flavour of real and imagined there, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's all going on there. But there are other ways that the leaders kind of assert themselves, aren't there? So tell me about that.
Well, in the case of all 4 leaders, one of the main requirements is that nobody gets the better of them.
Yes.
Either one of the other people present, or for that matter, one of the presenters. And what you find in the case of conversation is that they don't want to yield. They don't want to give up the floor unnecessarily. Now, what I'm surprised by, because I've been through all this material, I was really stunned to discover that Gerry Adams, compared to all the rest, is quite prepared when he's interrupted to give the floor to the presenter.
Yes.
And to some extent, the same is also true of Joan.
John Burton.
Yeah. She's also. On the other hand, Enda tends to have a kind of mixed policy, and we can see that now.
And okay, that's a little flavour of that.
I do insist.
Is there nothing in your position that is rooted in the fact that, for example, Martin Ferris, a TD of Sinn Féin TD, tried by the Special Criminal Court,
every year over the next 5 years.
But on the point of gangland, both yourselves and the Commissioner have said it wasn't about resources.
We've proven that in the last 2 budgets with reductions of the USC at the lower level
I know it's
and
not
increases in the minimum
I know it's
wage
not a popular thing to do, but to say the higher earners will have a clawback of 5%.
Now, in all these 3 cases, what we've seen is instances where Pat Kenny has interrupted them and they've conceded the floor to him.
Yes.
But when we come to Michael Martin, it's another kettle altogether, in the sense that he doesn't really like to give up the floor at all. Wherever he can, he does his utmost to continue talking over and above. In other words, it's not a case of nobody's going to be pushing me around.
Okay, here we go.
Because it's a big issue with young families and children.
Okay,
in addition to that, if I may, we're going to also help working families in terms of extending mortgage interest relief.
Okay, so he's stood his ground in that sense, asserting themselves. They have different tactics, don't they? Different ways of trying to be the...
There are little stratagems that people can use. And what's interesting here is that the last 2 people we've seen tend to use the following stratagem. If you're talking away and you're worried about somebody interrupting you, one of the things you can do is you can start to enumerate on your hands. Do finger counting.
Yeah.
Well, there's several points I want to make here, and the implication is quite clear because it says to the other person, hey, I'm making a list, don't interrupt me.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we find.
Okay, it makes, I can see why you'd use it, because you kind of say you better give them the time to finish the point, counting
exactly.
it out. As long as they only have 10 fingers. Let's have a look at Micheál Martin in action here.
The problem is this.
Threshold
for the Peter McVerry, Simon, Focus Ireland.
We've changed the building regulations, we've dropped the levies in Cork and Dublin, we've given them authorisation and the local authorities to build in a much more expeditious fashion.
So there they are, counting their way through, hold the floor, keep as long, stay in as long as possible. And what is non-verbal leakage?
Now, non-verbal leakage is a technical term that psychologists apply to those instances where body language reveals something about the person's internal makeup. In other words, we have a tiny, usually quite small little pieces of behaviour that, as it were, leak out, providing indications of the way in which somebody's thinking, feeling, or in some cases, what they're likely to do next. And looking at the 4 leaders, what we discover is that they all have, or most of them have, quite distinctive forms of leakage.
It sounds messy, but I'm gonna roll with it. I'm beginning with Micheál Martin. What's his leakage?
Now remember, Micheál does not like to give up the floor.
Yes.
But there are occasions when he's magnanimous and he indicates to you that he is giving up the floor, but it's on his own terms, or he's come to the end of what he's saying, and he'll mark it. And he does it with a tiny little mouth purse. He actually closes his mouth like this in order to say, that's me, I'm done, I'm finished, you can speak now.
The Micheál Martin mouth purse. All right, patent that.
It's not implementable.
Okay, just in terms of balance, I want to...
There it
it is.
The services they need, that's what I and my party stand for in this election.
And mouth purse. And that's it. That's his way of saying full stop.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're going to show us another piece here. I think it's Jerry Adams that we're going to look at now to find out what his leakage is.
Yeah, well, why don't you look at it?
Okay.
And you tell us what you see, if anything.
All right.
Is there nothing in your position that is rooted in the fact that, for example, Martin Ferris, a TD of Sinn Féin TD, tried by the Special Criminal Court, the killers of Jerry McCabe were in front of the Special Criminal Court?
Now, I did see something. Did you see something very... What did you see? Did you see that little Elvis thing he did? It was like, oh, no, it's Mark Wilson. It wasn't one of those?
Yeah.
Is that what am I right in saying that?
Yep.
It was that. Tell me what that is.
Well, that is a micro-momentary expression.
When he had one.
Yeah. And we measured it earlier on, and I think it lasted something between a quarter and a third of a second.
Can we see it again?
Yeah.
Just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about here. And so he gets the question he doesn't like, and he responds by watching
your position that is rooted in the fact that, for example, Martin Ferris, a TD of Sinn Féin TD, tried by the Special Criminal Court, the killers of Jerry McCabe were in front of the Special Criminal Court.
We have it. Do you want to see it in slow motion? Honestly, it's so discreet and quick that you need to go, okay, so give us Jerry's verbal leakage in slow motion, please. Watch the lip, and here's... No, I don't want that at all. So what is that saying to us, that little moment?
So these micro-momentary expressions are very revealing, because what they do is they open the curtains just momentarily and provide us with a view to what's going on inside. And this question about Martin Ferris, he did not like it at all. No, he was worried about it. It disturbed him. Don't forget, he was keeping up a poker face, and yet his capacity for self-control was momentarily breached. Out comes this tiny little gesture, this facial expression, and what does it tell us? It tells us that that is a facial expression not of disgust, but of contempt, because disgust is bilateral, contempt is on the one side, and it is in essence him psychologically thinking to himself, although he may be unaware of it, do you know what, I do not like that question, I feel contemptuous towards the question and you, the person who's posed it.
So if you were kind of out to battle him in debate, or as a presenter and a moderator, if you like, and if you had done your homework, you'd know you had him on the ropes in some ways.
Definitely.
When he did something like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, in my mind, that when that happens, what it shows us is that it's a classic case of disquiet. You know, he's psychologically disturbed, and understandably so.
Okay, Joan Burton, does she have verbal leakage, or is she?
Yes, they all have.
They all have it. This is not.
They all have this.
Yeah,
leakage,
everyone has. We all have it.
Yeah, we all do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. So in the case of Joan, she again gets asked a rather awkward question, and she doesn't like it. Well, why don't we have a look at what happens?
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Politicians make promises that they don't intend to keep, that they break.
And the last time Fianna Fáil were in government...
See, they're all experts now. It's all about going, yeah. So what are we talking about? The tongue came out just for momentary. Wasn't trying to get a fly. It was just... It was just saying, what was it doing?
Okay, so this is called the tongue show.
Right.
We have to name all these things.
Yeah, indeed.
And it's a disguised rejection signal. Now, when we were little babies, and in our mother's arms, and we had our mother's breast in our mouth, there was only one thing we could do, either suck or expel the breast by pressing out the tongue.
This is a stretch now, isn't it?
No?
I mean, you know what I mean. Are you really?
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying to you is that it's an infantile rejection signal.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the way in which we go back into our past and reject something by pressing our tongue out.
Extraordinary. Now, what about the Taoiseach then? What's his verbal leakage?
Well, something rather similar.
Let's have a look at him.
And you're saying, yes, it is, because I know better. Why would you do that in the face of all that?
And out it goes. And are you going to give? Are you giving me this? Oh, there it is again. So you give me the same answer to the Joan question?
Yes. Now, the thing about the Taoiseach is there's several things we could... he's got a whole range of giveaway signals, by the way, but purely for the purposes of balance, I've decided just to focus on one.
Okay, and this is his one. And again, just to remind us, this is him saying, I don't want...
Well, we could see it very clearly in the first question that was posed to him, right at the beginning of this clip. You know, he was asked a rather awkward question, and he sat there very composed, superficially, and stuck his little tongue out. And somehow, at the back of his brain, he's thinking, okay, well, I sorted her out, or I sorted him out, because I expelled them from me, and I feel much better for it.
Well, we'll all be watching the next debate with enormous interest for all these tells. But in the meantime, Peter, thanks for coming in to see us.
Pleasure.
Peter Collett, ladies and gentlemen. Intriguing, no doubt about it.